Thank you for joining the Philadelphia RAB podcast, hosted by myself, Asia Coney. We are about to interview Kelvin A, the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Housing Authority. We are delighted to ask him many questions and to provide you with information about what the Housing Authority is doing, has done, and will be doing in the future. Hello, Mr. Jeremiah.
Madam Commissioner, Asia, how are you?
I am so fine. I'm so fine. I'm so glad you could join me. And clearly,
My
that folks
pleasure.
in this city of Philadelphia and around the country know who you are, as if they don't, and what you do.
I
So
am
thank
just
you.
an innocent boy from the islands trying
Yeah,
to make it
say
in a
that
big
all the
city.
time, and you know I know better. However, tell
Don't
us
tell
about your
anybody.
role as the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Housing Authority.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, first of all, I said, I know better than that, that innocent
Indeed,
stuff.
indeed.
So now we're going to talk truth.
Yes.
Tell us about your role as the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Housing Authority.
Well, Asia, as you know, I've had the incredible good fortune to be leading the fourth largest housing authority in the United States. And as you know, we serve about 80,000 residents, both in our public housing and our HCV, the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We have a budget that is approximately 50 million, excuse me. In addition to having an employee workforce of about 1,100 permanent employees. And so in my role as president and CEO, I oversee the day-to-day operations of the Housing Authority. I make sure the wheels are well oiled and running appropriately, that we are moving in terms of delivering the services that our residents have come to expect from the Housing Authority, that we are expanding the availability of housing, that we're responding to residents' needs and aspirations, being a source for good in the community, and helping our residents thrive.
I'm so glad to help be a part of that. Could you also talk about some of your important accomplishments as the head of the Philadelphia Housing Authority?
Well, folks ask me that question often, and as you know, the accomplishments are not mine. I've had the good fortune of working with a team of professionals, with a board that I trust, that trusts me, including you, with a resident leadership population that understands the needs that understands their needs best, and that come to us very well informed about the things that they need to be able to live their lives in the way that they choose. And so, and I said it's a royal we, because all of the things that we have accomplished, I think we've done it together. I'm not one who takes credit for it. I'm just sitting in the seat, and I'm pushing the levers where it needs to be pushed to achieve certain outcomes. But I would say that among the things that I'm most proud of is trying to find creative ways to give our residents a pathway to social and economic mobility, and to see that play out in some real ways, right? So when I came on board, and I know you know all of this, you've heard that so many times before. When I came on board, the average household income at PHA was about $10,000. And we put in a whole host of programming aimed at giving residents who wanted an opportunity to get a hand up. And so they've taken a lot of that on themselves. And that's why I said that my success is their success, and their success is all of our success, because we now have an average household income that hovers around $18,000-$19,000. That's an $8,000 or $9,000 increase in the last 10 years. And for some, it may not be It may not be huge, but for our residents, it really, really is. And so finding pathways to opportunity for our residents has to be one of those key things. I think the second I would say would be the quality of our housing, Asia. Um, it's interesting, and you know this. So I'm accused of building houses for the private market, and it's only because people don't know that it's PHA.
That's right.
Because one of the things that we've done, and in the past, my predecessors had these huge signs that says Philadelphia Housing Authority on the property, and it would say that the name of the property, and then it would say, in this case, Kelvin Jeremiah, President and CEO, Mayor so and so, and we've moved away from all of that because, as you know, when you're in service to others, it can never, ever, ever be about you, right? And so we've moved away from all of that. So people don't know when they drive by a new PHA development, that it's actually not luxury, it's actually not market rate, that it's actually subsidized housing. And I'm very proud of that because I say to folks often that our residents are not unlike that. They want to live in good communities. They want to live in safe communities. They want to send their children to schools where they will learn. They want the same kind of amenities that you and I want. And their aspirations, which is important to me, is not unlike yours and mine, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to send my kid to that school over there. That's failing, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, man, let me see, I can live in any community. Let me choose the one with the highest crime, right? We don't. They don't. And so when we build houses, and you have been such an incredible supporter in this, we build houses for folks where they are, how they live, with those things in mind. For example, one of the things that our residents said to us was, Mr. Jeremiah, we needed a place to store our stuff, whether it's a grill, a bicycle, the extra stuff that you accumulate over whatever period, our kids' toys that they've outgrown. And guess what happened? We've built in our new developments storage pods for everyone, for each apartment. That gives them the space that they need so that when you go into a unit, people feel welcome, right? People feel that they're living in dignity, because that's what we do here at PHA. So that would be the second thing that I'm incredibly proud of. And then I think the third would be the overwhelming transformation that happens with our development activities. In every community where we are, we see a marked difference when PHA steps in and steps out, and PHA invest in the community, because we do more than just building, right? We invest in the community, we invest in people, we invest in a housing infrastructure that incorporates all of the dynamics of what a sustainable and sound community in the classic sense look like, where we reintegrated streets, where we don't have these super blocks, where we've created these enclaves, impenetrable sometimes. Our families are now part of the broader community, and I'm really incredibly proud of that. So those are the three top ones, I would say. I mean, there are a lot of others. If you give me another 5 minutes, I can go on for forever, probably. But those, I think, are the key ones.
Well, I just want to pivot, because as you're talking about those three accomplishments, I just want to pivot a minute and have you talk about the fact that we hear all the time that the housing authority is gentrifying the communities. I had to get that question in.
So that's one that's close to that just makes my blood boil. So I don't know if folks fully understand what it means to gentrify. And when you talk about gentrification, You're talking about the displacement of a certain kind of population and replacing them with another kind of population. I don't know where PHA has done that. So if somebody has seen PHA do that, please let me know. Because I think they point to, for example, where we are in Sharswood. Where we are in Sharswood, we were always there, right? And the incredible redevelopment that we're doing here, the transformative project that we're doing here speaks for itself. We have families, the average household in the new developments is about $16,000, right? And you have folks who have returned to the community where they are. They're coming back to a better community, a safer community, more amenities, better school. Have they been gentrified? I would think not. So I don't know what folks are talking about. If they're looking at the quality of houses and it doesn't say, those homes don't say anymore Philadelphia Housing Authority, that's okay, because we're trying to move away from the stigma of the so-called projects. And for all of the negative connotation that brings, I am not at all apologetic for creating a community, for recreating communities that respect the way we live as a people, right? That brings respect and dignity to the people who occupy units in those communities. I will never apologize for creating safer communities, for giving our families opportunity for them to find social and economic mobility. And to those people who criticize us for doing that, shame on you. Perhaps you would like to see folk, blacks and brown, in a particular situation where they can never, ever escape the poverty trap. But that has never been my goal. My goal is to open that poverty trap so wide that every one of our families can escape it.
Which speaks to one of the things I always say: it's not where you live, but how you live. If
Yes.
you give a person a decent place to live, they will ultimately live decently. So,
Absolutely.
really,
Well, that
we have demonstrated
that goes to Asia. One of the things that you and I have talked about so many times, and the new approach to PHA development, we are not merely concerned about where our families live. We are concerned equally about how they live, right? And the efforts that we make to change the trajectory for our young men and women, for our senior citizens, for our single mothers who are having to cope with so many different issues, not the list of which finding gainful, sustainable employment, right? That's part of who we are, right? And I refuse to accept that a state of play that says, you know what, you guys are poor and you should leave abysmally, right? Or you shouldn't have all of the amenities that we have because we live in Center City or Chestnut Hill or some other affluent part of the city, right? Housing is about how we live as a people, how we interact, how we socialize, right? And it must come from a place, I think, where you're seeing people not unlike you or different than you, but exactly as you, because our aspirations for our children, for our communities, are exactly alike, whether you live in Chestnut Hill or Center City or right here in Sharswood.
clearly. So we've talked about the accomplishments. What about some of the challenges?
Well, so the challenges are in fact associated directly with some of the accomplishments, as you well know, with diminishing resources in terms of federal subsidies for affordable housing, come some real challenges. We have a growing backlog of deferred capital needs that now hovers around $2 billion. We have to address our aging housing stock. And to do that adequately means that we need to be adequately funded. So that's a significant challenge. We have a wait list that's about 47,000 people. And the challenge there, obviously, is that there isn't a sufficient number of affordable units to house everyone. Because once you're in, you're in. And we haven't seen the kind of movement, dramatic movement in household incomes that would bring people up and out where they would need to rely on public housing or the housing choice voucher program. And the pandemic, frankly, has heightened all of those. So it's a real challenge. How do we create more affordable housing? How do we expand the availability of units to serve those who we are not yet serving? That's a real challenge. And then, I think the third one is, related to the first goal, the first achievement that I talked about, which is how do we continue in an environment where we are supposed to be a housing provider first and foremost? How do you provide those pathways for residents to find what I refer to as the social and economic mobility? How do you move up and out in an environment that is very challenging for the population? And so, finding creative ways, finding partners who understand that objective that we have, that we are not just a housing provider, that we are beyond housing, we're probably the largest social services provider in the city, if not the state, is a real challenge for us. Because as you well know, we are not funded for those things. And we make an appropriation from our operating budget because we understand the needs of our families. And we're working hard every single day to support them and to provide resources to them that helps them escape the poverty trap.
This is probably a good time to talk about some of the new programs and initiatives that exist at the Housing Authority. We're still engaged in making sure folks are being vaccinated, our seniors. So could you talk to us about some of, because there are many, new initiatives?
So when this administration and the administration I'm talking about from the board down, right? That includes me, the senior team. We have a resident-centric approach. And I got to tell you, you've instilled this in me from the time when we were not particularly getting along.
When was that?
I can't even remember. Right? And so all of the work that we do, I'm really excited about, for example, the vaccination initiative, PHA Cares, where we are actually bringing vaccines, COVID-19 vaccine to our residents where they are. For example, we've now effectively vaccinated about 650 of our seniors. And we know from the experiences that we had that these are 650 people who would not have left their homes, who are not technologically savvy enough to go online to fill out an application, right? To set up an appointment online, that is as is required, and who, because of whatever disability or ailments that they have, would not go and stand up in long lines at the Civic Center. And so we thought critically about how do we provide a delivery of service that gets to our residents where they are, where they live, and that would encourage them to to take the vaccine, given the incredible disproportionate impact COVID-19 has had on our population. And so, we brought it to our residents. Um, I will also say that even during the pandemic, when I was getting all kinds of, misinformation about what that virus is, it was the resident leadership and resident population that stepped up when we shared information, factual information from informed sources that allowed our residents to adhere to a certain protocol that allowed us not to see the kind of outbreaks that we were seeing elsewhere in the country. And people were saying, well, what is Jeremiah doing that, we haven't seen, at our senior sites, these widespread outbreaks. Well, in fact, it wasn't Jeremiah, it was our resident leadership and our resident taking stock, recognizing that PHA was going to be right there with them, that they would not be alone. And so we implemented deep enhanced cleaning. We installed hand sanitizers. We shared information about, how residents could keep safe. We provided them with some almost 25,000 reusable face masks at a time when it still wasn't fashionable. And they adhered and they did what they needed to do. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the Philly C scholarship that has now awarded over $2 million to Philly PHA young people and others who want to go to college or who want to go back to a trade school or vocational school. And these kids are now, we're in the 7th year, they're now graduating, they're getting good jobs. They're not coming back to public housing. I'm incredibly proud of that. I'm incredibly proud of the Vox Big Picture High School that we, in partnership with the Philadelphia School District, with Big Picture, with the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers and others, to bring a high-performing school that speaks to our children's need in a real way, that addresses the trauma that a lot of our kids are confronted with, that they have to go to school with day in and day out, and despite of that, are succeeding. I'm incredibly proud of those programs. And I'm incredibly proud of the Workforce Development Center in our Section 3 program that is giving real opportunities, real meaningful opportunities for our residents to be gainfully employed, for them to get a trade, for them to join the union and get a real living income. Those are all things that we all should be proud of. And I wish that there would be more support for lifting us up, all up. There is, I think, a John F. Kennedy saying that, rising tides lifts all ships. I'd like to see that be the case for my Black and brown brothers and sisters.
Well, we also, you didn't mention, our up and coming entrepreneur program.
Yes.
I was just over at Vox, walking around the incubator, met with Danish and Shanae, who was responsible for developing that, and beginning to get really excited because it's now coming to a point where folks are going to be selected for their first cohort. So just talk a little bit about the entrepreneurship program.
Yeah, so again, it goes back to what I talked about initially, finding pathways to opportunities for our residents so that they can find economic mobility. So too often, these are programs that are so removed from our population, and I think they have become so disengaged by the lack of support that they receive. And here we are, PHA again, stepping up and saying, no. We're an economic engine. and we are going to use our dollars strategically to empower our population, to give them opportunities where they too can benefit from the dollars that PHA spends. And so the entrepreneurship program is now looking at our population. I think we've received about 100 or so applications. And we'll select from among those, I think about 10. But it just shows the need. And when you give people a chance, right? We're not guaranteeing anything. We're saying we're going to open up this door for you. We're going to support you in your efforts. And if you want it, we'll be there to support you. And that's what's happening with the entrepreneurship program. So whether somebody wants to open a hair salon, or want to be a barber, or want to be a minority contractor, or they want to establish, some other kind of business, we are going to look through what they're proposing. We're going to support them from soup to nuts, and we're going to help them get on their feet. That's then become a small business that can employ probably another family member, another person from the community, right? And that has a multiplier effect. And so, I'm really excited about that, and to see what ultimately these young business minds would put forward. I will tell you as well, Asia, I got calls from people who are not PHA residents asking if they can participate.
I've gotten a few too.
Unfortunately, no, they cannot. They'll have to find their own program in the city. But I think it speaks to the need that exists right now, and we just want to be in a place to support our program. Not everyone gonna want to go back to school. Not everyone wants to go back to go into a job training program. We have a lot of good people that lives within our housing developments who have, I think, good ideas about business. We have cooks to barbers to folks who are doing cosmetology and all of those things, and who only want an opportunity to open their own little store someplace in the city, their own little bar, whatever it is. And we're going to support them in doing that.
Yeah, well, I also like to add, we have folks that we don't often talk about that are doing that illegal activity, but
Yeah,
they do have the savvy, if they're able to do that, to legitimize themselves and
right.
become businesses so they're not looking over their shoulder continuously.
That is true.
That too.
I mean, how many times, if you're a Black woman in PHA, that you're going over to so-and-so apartment to get your hair braided, or your hair done, or your weave done,
That's
or
right.
to get your nails done. We're doing it, right? And so they're going to come out of the shadow in a real way, and we're going to be there to support them in that effort.
Well, the secretary, our new HUD secretary, I was reading her testimony to Congress and was delighted for her to recognize, after doing an assessment, the need for additional funding in a big way. So I was very impressed to read her testimony. So my question to you, in 2021 and going forward, hopefully there will be some additional funding in the public housing avenue. What additional opportunities to increase the PHA budget in this new administration would you be looking to address?
Well, I think there are several, but the first two or three, I would say, would be around the capital fund program. We have been woefully underfunded there. And it's not just PHA, it's virtually every housing authority across the country. I think there are some estimates. Back in 2010, the estimate for deferred capital needs were around $27 billion. I think that has now risen to probably over $75 billion. And the Biden-Harris administration has put forward some initial goals around funding that initiative to the tune of about 75 billion. And so, we're very supportive of that. That's one opportunity for us to address in terms of the PHA specific need, our nearly $2 billion in capital needs. That will go a long way in helping us address all of the infrastructure issues that we have with the aging housing stock, to bring a lot of our aging housing stock up to 21st century standards, to modernize our units, et cetera. And so I'm looking forward to working with Secretary Fudge and others on that. I think the need to address the incredible and desperate need for affordable housing across the country. Housing affordability often is seen as an urban issue, and that couldn't be further from the truth. In every corner of this country, in cities, in rural areas, in big states, small states, rural states, non-rural states, southern states, northern states, western states, eastern states, in every corner of this country, there's an affordable housing crisis, a housing affordability crisis. And I think this gives the administration a real opportunity to confront it head on and to find some creative ways to increase housing subsidies that ultimately would address the incredible wait list that we have and so many other housing authorities across the country. So I'm talking specifically about expanding the Housing Choice Voucher Program to increase the number of people that could be served that are not yet being served, who may very well be couch surfing, living with families in overcrowded, inadequate conditions. So that would be a second opportunity. And I think the third is, which goes in line with the second, is again to increase those opportunities to build more affordable housing. Recognizing that it is a costly endeavor, but it's one that I think would be hard pressed not to solve now. You have a more favorable administration that understands the incredible role of housing in our society, and that it serves, stable housing serves as a platform where so many other social ills can jump off from, that can address other social ills. You have stable housing, you can be in a good permanent job. Your kids can be in a stable school. When you don't have those things, just think about it. And when you're unhoused or homeless, think about those kind of conditions and all of the associated social determinants of health that can stem from those things. Health outcomes, academic outcomes, employment outcomes, all of that, I think, has a direct correlation to stable housing. And so it really does provide, when you talk about how do we address poverty in Philadelphia, perhaps first we should target that towards housing.
As we begin to wrap this interview up, and it has truly been my pleasure, I would like you to talk about the fact that Philadelphia is unique among 39 other housing authorities. We have a MTW, Move to Work designation, and we also have been able to compound that with the RAB program. For folks that don't know what MTW is and RAB, could you give us a definition?
So MTW, or Moving to Work designation, gives us funding flexibility to determine and to create local housing initiatives based on what our local needs are. it's not the typical one size fits all. So typically, a non-MTW agency receives three specific funding streams that cannot be, that are not fungible, that has to be spent on the stated purpose. So the public housing program can only fund our public housing developments that you see across the city, for example. The housing choice voucher program can only provide a housing choice voucher. And the capital fund program separately can only fund capital needs. Our MTW designation gives us those three funding buckets into one. It gives us that funding in the form of a block grant, essentially, that allows us, PHA, and in this case, the city and the board, to decide how best to use those dollars. So if our need currently is to expand Section 8, Housing Choice Voucher Program, then we could do that, and we can use any of the three funding streams to do that. If our need is to find some creative ways to address homelessness or hard to serve population, we can devise programs using the block funding for that specific purpose. If our objective is to expand the availability of affordable housing by building more units, then it allows us to do that. So you combine those resources in a way that maximizes certain outcomes that are locally determined.
And rental assistance?
And the rental assistance, the RAB program, in the past, we had not been permitted to use the incredible equity that we have in our properties to have debt or to go to the private market to get money to address, for example, a capital need that we might have. The RAD program allows us to do exactly that now. So in the case of West Park, for example, where we have over $50 million in capital needs currently, we could go to the market, to the private financial market, and we can get a loan towards repairing the capital needs or addressing the capital needs that exist there. That has not been the case in previous years. And so what the RAD program ultimately does is allows us to find financial resources that can be brought to bear on addressing capital needs to stabilize our existing housing stock, to rehab them for generations to come as affordable housing, and that brings in real capital dollars to do those things that we need to do to make sure that our housing is safe and sanitary.
So as we close out, I'll give you the next couple of minutes to state and say whatever you want to say to close out this interview.
Well, I think, Asia, it has been, I came to PHA, almost 10 years ago. I think August is going to be 10 years. It seems like an eternity. But as I reflect on how far we've come and the incredible work that we have done, I'm so incredibly pleased with, the results that we've been able to achieve together. We actually have moved the dial a lot in some areas. There is still a lot of work to be done, and I'm committed to that work. I am reminded about what it is that I wanted to do when I was growing up, and I know you know the story. And I've always said that I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I knew ultimately what I needed to do was to do work that made a real and meaningful difference in people's lives. And I'm doing exactly that. And I think the added bonus, in all candor, is to be able to do it with people like yourself, like Nellie Reynolds, um, like Lynette Bronceau and Herb Wetzel, like the Jackie McDowell, like a RAB, and so many residents who care deeply about their community, who have given their life's work in service to others. I am so incredibly fortunate. I feel so incredibly fortunate that I've been able to come to Philadelphia and to effect certain change. Um, and that the lesson that I've learned from you, especially from Nellie and others, those are lessons that I will take with me forever. I came to Philadelphia thinking that I had, in some cases, all the answers. And many a times you reminded me, no, Kelvin, you don't have all of the answers. You encouraged me to listen to our residents, to really listen, right? To listen, and to hear them. And when I've been able to do that, I think the true lesson that I have learned is that they know what they want. They know what their aspirations are. They know what they want for their children. And they know that certain conditions that they live in is unacceptable. And they want better for themselves. And if not for themselves, for their children. And if not for their children's children. And to have come full circle, to really fully appreciate that, and to have an approach that is not top down, but one that is in partnership, working towards a shared goal, a shared vision, where we just want to live our best life that we can, to live in an environment where we can be proud to say, that's where I live. That's my home. That's where I raise my children. That's where I've given baptismal party or graduation parties, and that my child has gotten an opportunity to go to a great school, and they can walk down the hallways without being fearful of being raped or abused, or frankly being shot. I think we did okay. I think we're doing okay. And I'm incredibly proud to have learned that. And I don't think I could have learned that anywhere else but from you and from Philadelphia Housing Authority and from the city of Philadelphia.
Well, thank you so much for doing the interview and for being a great partner. And I don't think that I've said that about many EDs or
I'm
CEOs.
glad this is being recorded.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
No, I am delighted. I was delighted to do it. I'm happy to do it anytime. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.